Welcome to the walkthrough for Assignment 1C in my Scalable Microservices course in the spring of 2023. The purpose of the third and final part of this three-part assignment is to deepen your understanding of how to develop synchronous microservices with Spring WebMVC, Java Structured Concurrency, and Java Regular Expressions. In this assignment, you'll continue to evolve the synchronous microservice that used Spring WebMVC from Assignment B to more comprehensively use the ShutdownOnFailure and ShutdownOnSuccess classes to concurrently return lists of objects containing information about movies from a movie recommender system we'll use throughout this course. The code you write for this assignment does not have a GUI and runs as a Spring application with an automated test program. Please feel free to use this test program to help debug your solution. The following resources may be helpful in completing this assignment. An overview of Java Structured Concurrency appears here, and videos giving an overview of Java Structured Concurrency appear here. Naturally, we'll cover this material in class, which will be available in my YouTube playlist. The Movies microservice is packaged as a project using IntelliJ. This app is written in Java and demonstrates various Spring WebMVC and Java Structured Concurrency features. For the purposes of Assignment 1C, however, you will only need to be aware of the following directories: Recommender Movies, which contains the skeletons you need to fill in, as we discussed below, and Movies Source Test, which is a set of unit tests that exercise the features you're implementing to evaluate whether you've correctly satisfied this assignment's requirements. To compile this code, you'll need to use the provided IntelliJ project. You can run this project by clicking the green arrow next to the Movies Test drop-down menu in the IntelliJ IDE. You'll need to modify several files containing the skeleton Java code by completing the to-do, you fill in here tasks to provide a working solution. Please don't change the overall structure of the skeleton. Just fill in the to-do tasks. And whatever you do, do not delete the to-do markers, or your submission will not be reviewed. In particular, you need to finish implementing the to-do tasks for this assignment in the following files and folders. First, you'll need to complete the to-do tasks in the movies controller.java file to update the various fields and methods and define endpoint handler methods that return lists of objects containing information about movies. Make sure that you give the names of these methods the same names you use in the next file, which is moviesservice.java. Here, you'll need to complete the to-do tasks in various fields and methods called by the movies controller that use the Java Structured Concurrency ShutdownOnFailure and ShutdownOnSuccess classes and the Java Sequential Streams framework to return lists of objects containing information about movies. You'll also use Java Regular Expressions both in movies controller as well as in moviesservice.java to get more precise control over searches. You'll need to complete the to-do tasks in the serverbeans.java file, which are basically these factory methods known as beans that can be injected into Java classes using the Spring auto-wired annotation to load a dataset containing movie titles and descriptive vectors. And then finally, you'll need to update again movies sync proxy.java, where you'll need to complete the to-do task to implement various proxies to various endpoints in the movies microservice. You'll also use Java Regular Expressions here to get more precise control over searches. To be fair, the server beans.java and movies sync.proxy.java files are basically identical in Assignment 1C as they were in Assignment 1B. And so the main places you'll need to make changes will be in the movies service.java file in order to do a slightly different way of handling concurrency, where we're going to be using movies as the unit of concurrency and then regular expression searches as a unit of concurrency within the movies concurrency. As always, your solution should strive to use no loops or if-else statements in the assignment and instead just use Java functional programming features, including lambda expressions, method references, and sequential stream aggregate operations, as well as, of course, the Java structured concurrency mechanisms. Your solution will be considered correct if it passes all the unit tests, is commented thoroughly, and addresses my review comments. Solutions that are not commented thoroughly will not be reviewed. Skeleton code for this assignment is available here in my GitHub repository. Now that you've set up your GitLab account, simply pull this skeleton code into your repository, placing it as a sibling to the Assignment 1B solution. Read the skeleton code carefully and complete the to-do markers. There are unit tests in the movie source test folder that are provided to increase our collective confidence, that is, you and me and the TAs, that your implementation is working as expected. As usual, testing only demonstrates the presence of bugs, not their absence, so don't rely solely on the unit tests to detect problems in your code. Assignment 1C is designed to deepen your understanding of developing synchronous microservices using Spring WebMVC and Java Structured Concurrency. The skeletons and unit tests are subtle, though you don't need to understand them all to complete your solution. This assignment is more complicated than assignment 1B, so please start early and ask questions in class, office hours, and on the Piazza discussion forum to ensure you complete this assignment successfully. Now that we've walked through the specification for assignment 1C, let's go ahead and take a look at the skeletons. First and foremost, most of what you did for assignment 1B is going to translate directly into what you need to provide as the solution for the movies module in assignment 1C. There's one important difference, however. In addition to addressing any of the comments that I left you that you need to address in assignment 1B in order for it to pass the tests, please make sure that you also come into the concat matches method and add in the appropriate code here to eliminate any duplicates in the stream. This was something that was not tested for in assignment 1B, but we've corrected that for the next assignment. So please make sure that your movies module implementation implements this correctly. By and large, however, most of the other parts should be pretty much the same as long as you implemented it correctly in assignment 1B or can fix those things quickly. So let's now turn our attention to the skeletons for assignment 1C in the movies-ex folder. So once again, I think pretty much everything that's over here in the tests client, movies sync proxy is going to be the same as you did in assignment 1B, assuming you did it correctly. So just take a quick look, make sure that you've addressed any and all comments addressed that I gave you for the proxies code, but that should be pretty straightforward. If we come over here into the main portion and we look down in common and we look in server, you'll see a couple other things you need to do. First, you need to make sure that you properly re-implement the same code that you had for assignment 1B for the movie list bean, and make sure you add the appropriate bean and couple other places that you need to add. This should be very straightforward. I think most people got this right. There were a few little minor things about formatting and making sure you use Java streams here, but this should be pretty straightforward. The movies controller is largely the same with one slight difference. One of the things, or actually a couple slight differences, a couple things you're going to need to do here when you implement the various search methods, the one that calls search with a list of string queries and the one that just calls search with a single query. In that particular case, please make sure that you add in the code to do the decoding there. So unlike assignment 1B, where we did the decoding in the service, for assignment 1C, we're going to be doing the decoding in the controller. And I think all things being equal, that's probably a better place for the decoder to take place is in here. So make sure you do the decoding there. And you can, of course, reuse the webutils methods, or I think the webutils methods that you should be able to find here in order to be able to do that. So make sure you do that stuff in the controller for assignment 1C in the movies EX module, but keep it the same way it was in assignment 1B in the movies module. That's, again, just more of an artifact of the tests. So now let's take a look at the implementation of the movies service for assignment 1C. This plays the same role as it did in assignment 1B, but we're going to change the implementation in a number of very interesting ways to work around some deficiencies with the implementation in assignment 1B. So first thing to note is we're going to have an exception defined here called it no such match exception, and you'll see in a minute how that's going to be used. We're going to use that with the ShutdownOnSuccess class that we'll talk about later as part of Java structured concurrency. You'll also have to go ahead and wire together this particular movie field, movies field, mmovies, which is a list of movies. That should be pretty straightforward. The getMovies implementation will be essentially identical to what you had in assignment 1B, assuming you did it correctly. So please make sure you take a look at the Frequently Made Mistakes video to see some things that could be improved in some cases. Now let's go ahead and take a look at things that change. So the first thing that changes is the search method that takes a single regular expression query as a string. So in this case, unlike assignment 1B, where we just kind of forwarded it along to the other version that took a list, making a one-element list, this time we're actually going to do something a lot more interesting and a lot more concurrent. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to convert the regular expression query into a pattern. And I think you can use a helper method to do that. And then down here, you'll go ahead and create an appropriate structured task scope that shuts down on failure. That should be a pretty obvious hint what that's going to be. And then you're going to write some code here to call a helper method to concurrently get a list of all movie objects that match the pattern that you have here. So this is really not a pattern list. It's really just a pattern instance, I guess is a better word, as we see up there. And then you'll do your barrier synchronization to wait for all the tasks to complete. You'll throw an exception if anything goes wrong. And then you'll go ahead and call another helper method that'll return a list of movie objects that matched the at least one client query. And you get some reuse here, as we'll see when we go look at the next method. So the next method down here is the search method that takes the list of regular expression queries. And here you'll go ahead and convert the regular expression queries into a list of pattern objects. Previously up here, you didn't have a list, you just had one. But down here, you can use a factor method that makes a list. Should be pretty obvious to figure out which one that is. And then once again, you'll create a new structured task scope that shuts down on failure. Should be no surprise what that is. And then you'll call a helper method to concurrently get a list of all the movie objects that match the pattern list. And this, again, is going to be a really cool variation of what we had last time. So what we're doing now is we're making the movies the initial unit of concurrency, rather than the queries being the initial unit of concurrency, which is the way we did it in assignment 1B. As before, you'll use the barrier synchronization method on scope that'll wait for all the tasks to complete or something to go wrong. So you either wait for them, you throw an exception if something went wrong, and then you'll call another helper method here to concatenate all the matches and return a list of movie objects that match at least one client query. So that should be pretty straightforward. Let's take a look at the make patterns method. So this is going to go ahead and make a list of patterns. This is a little bit slimmed down relative to what we had in assignment 1B because we're not doing the decoding in this method. We're doing the decoding back in the controller, which is honestly probably where it belongs. You can see here's the other factor method. This is the one that just makes a single regular expression pattern out of a regular expression string. So we'll use that, of course, in the version of search that just takes a single query parameter. Let's now go ahead and take a look at the get matches for patterns method. So what that does is it takes a list of patterns, and it's going to go ahead and take the ShutdownOnFailure scope, and you'll convert the list of movie objects to a stream, and you'll use the scope parameter to basically concurrently call a helper method that itself will use a nested Java structured task scope to concurrently determine if the movie title matches with each regular expression query. We'll look at that helper method in a second. It's really cool. And then the final thing you do is convert the stream back into a list and return that list, which will come back as a list of futures to movies. Down here, you can see the get matches for pattern. So unlike this one, get matches for patterns, where it's a list of patterns, this is just going to take a single pattern and the scope. And so that's where you write the code to convert the list of movies into a stream. And then you'll call a helper method that'll concurrently determine if each movie title matches that search query. And then you turn the stream back into a list, and you'll return a list of futures to movies. Now let's go ahead and find this new method called find matches for patterns task. So when you see the word task, that probably is a good indication that this is going to be used in a task-like capability. And this is going to be kind of fun. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take the list of patterns we've been given and the movie we're going to be searching for matches with that pattern list. And this time, we're going to use a different Java structured concurrency mechanism. We're going to use the ShutdownOnSuccess mechanism, which you'll have to allocate here. And then you're going to go ahead and call a little helper method here to determine if any pattern objects in the pattern list match the movie. And what's going to be so cool about this is the way this is going to work is it's going to go and search all of the patterns in the pattern list concurrently using ShutdownOnSuccess. And we'll talk about that in a second. So what's going to happen is we're going to go and try to find the first pattern that matches. The moment we find a pattern that matches, we're going to shut down the other things if they're still running and go ahead and bail out because that means we found one. And we only have to find one that matches. We don't care if there's 5 matches. We only care for the first one. That's why ShutdownOnSuccess is a nice technique to use here. So we'll use a barrier synchronizer to get the results of that match. And if nothing matches, then an exception will be thrown because that's the semantics of ShutdownOnSuccess. So if the exception is thrown, then we're going to end up basically caching that exception and just returning null. I put that exception handler in there for you. And if we don't get an exception, then at least one of them return the results. We want the first one that returned the results, so we'll grab the result from ShutdownOnSuccess and return that. So let's go ahead and take a look here. This is the find matches async method, and you can see that this takes the structured task scope ShutdownOnSuccess scope object that was passed to it from here, up in this context, and it also takes the list of patterns and the movie, and so it's going to go ahead and use the scope to create a new task and for each of the different patterns, and it's going to do it in such a way where if everything works, if you find a match, then you return the match. And that, of course, will poison all the other ones that are still running because we only care about the first one. And if we don't get a match, we're going to throw the exception, which is the no such pattern exception. No such match exception. And so it'll basically yield a no such match exception otherwise. So that's what's going to happen if we don't end up getting a match. Then we're going to throw the no such match exception. And that's important because that's going to be an indication to the ShutdownOnSuccess object that we didn't succeed. So we're not returning null. We're going to throw the no such match exception. And that will be ultimately transferred back into this execution exception, which will essentially return a value that would be the no such match exception. We're just going to return null here. So very important method to understand. This does some really cool stuff. Then we have a few other things down here where we're going to do find match async. And this is the more conventional ShutdownOnFailure model where we're just going to create a virtual thread to perform the processing concurrently. And we're going to go ahead and check for a match, which will either give us back a movie if there's a match or else return null. And some of this code is very similar to what you had in assignment 1B, just removing what's concurrent and what's not. Here's the match method. As you can see here, it finds a match between the pattern and the movie by creating a matcher for the movie's title with the pattern, and then calling a method that returns true if there's a match, else false. And make sure you look at the frequently made mistakes video to figure out what method to call here. It's pretty straightforward. And then finally, the last method we have here is convert movie matches, which takes a list of futures to movies, which are the results that came back from those other method calls. And it'll convert this into a stream of movie objects using the appropriate helper method from the futures util class, which will effectively get rid of the null values. And then we convert the stream to a list of movie objects that are going to be returned from the method. So this is going to go ahead and kind of clean everything up. And that's what we're going to return as the return value. So it'll be a list of movies as opposed to a list of futures to movies. So that's essentially a walkthrough of this assignment. As you can see, it's similar to what we had in assignment 1B, but not identical because we have a lot more concurrency and we're able to show off both the cool ShutdownOnFailure models of structured concurrency and also the very interesting ShutdownOnSuccess model of structured concurrency. So this should give you what you need in order to be able to succeed for assignment 1C's movies.ex implementation. Now that we've walked through the specification and the skeletons, let's show how to run the unit tests for assignment 1C. There's actually two sets of tests you'll have to run. One will be for movies tests, which is left over from assignment 1B. We've added some new tests for the movies portion of assignment 1B and included them in assignment 1C to more thoroughly exercise your codes. So you'll need to make sure that you add all the features from assignment 1B into the movies folder and then make sure you run the tests to ensure that they work properly. As usual, when you run these tests, please go ahead and take a snapshot of that, and you can store it in your top-level directory in your assignment 1C folder with a name, something like movies tests results. Then the next thing you'll need to do is you'll need to go ahead and select the movies EX tests and run those. And as with the movies tests, these will run a set of unit tests that are designed to work for the new features that we added in assignment 1C in the movies EX module. And as you can see here, there's a lot of tests. The tests do various things. They, of course, exercise kind of the features to make sure that your tests return the information that's expected. And then there's also many unit tests that exercise at a white box level how the implementations are designed to make sure that you're calling the methods, implementations with the right order, the right parameters, all kinds of other things that we're able to test. As always, we're not able to test everything, so of course I will review your code manually by inspecting it to make sure you're doing things correctly. But as long as you're able to get all the green check marks, as we can see here, that should give us pretty darn good confidence that your software is working as expected. So please make sure you run those tests. When you run the movies EX tests, please save them in another file, take a snapshot of that, a screenshot of that, and store that in another file called something like movies-extests.jpg or PNG or so on.